Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, greetings, listener. It's a lovely 10 a.m. On July 27th, 28th, something like that. And I am out for a stroll. Glad to be talking to you today. It's a bit blustery, so I've got my simple windshield up, which is where I put my hand up in a cup shape around the microphone. I know that it affects the quality of the sound, but not much I can do about it. Short of letting the episode just be very blustery, and that's hard to hear. So, welcome. I'm glad you're joining me today. So today is a bit more life of the gamer oriented rather than games oriented, so hopefully you'll find that edifying and amusing, if not interesting, hopefully all of those. And I wanted to start a little bit with a bit about me. I think part of what makes the podcast format so interesting or intriguing is that you get to know the host with a kind of intimacy that is not true in other formats, like a TV show format where you're talking to the host where they're sitting in a chair talking to you. There's a distance there. The podcast format, I'm right in your ear, and it feels, like I said, the word is intimate. At least I think so. So I thought I would share a little bit about me, and I think it leads to, something interesting about board gaming, perhaps. So I've always been an enthusiastic game player. I've played games as long as I can remember. There were plenty of board games early on. I remember one game day that took place over several days, where a buddy of mine and I set up a map of the globe on the wall of the playroom at his family's house, and we played some sort of elaborate airline building game. I don't remember exactly how it worked, but we had string and we had pins on the map, and it was awesome. It stuck with me, and it returned to me a couple episodes ago. I mentioned airlines or travel as a potential game, and it sort of got me thinking about that as a potential game subject. I know there have been other games about that already, but it'd be interesting to see what I might bring to it. That's for another day. I remember playing lots of games with my mom, with my dad, as I grew. But the story I wanted to tell today has to do with being bored at work. When I was in high school, I worked at a movie theater, and by the time I was like a junior, or especially the senior year that I was in high school, I was working at the movie theater, and I had a pretty free reign with my time. My mom wanted me to be home at a reasonable hour, or even an unreasonable hour, but she always wanted to know where I was going to be. So as long as I told her what I was doing, she was pretty open with how I spent my time. And as a result, I got to do some stuff that was pretty fun. Spent some time, and then I'm trying to remember if this was during the first summer after college, or if this was my senior year of high school, the summer before senior year. I think it's got to be the summer after my senior year, before I went away to college. So I was working at a movie theater, and I became good friends with the manager, a guy who I've continued to remain friends with off and on. I mean, we've always remained friends, but we've remained in touch off and on. He's moved around the country, lives in Seattle right now, so we haven't talked much lately, but I'm sure we'll cycle back into each other's lives at some point. Anyway, a good pal. At the time, he was the manager at the movie theater, and we became friends. And one day I was bored, and I found myself at Target, and they were selling, like in the dollar bin or something, a bunch of those little plastic green army men. I think it was when Toy Story was out, or Toy Story 2 maybe, and the little green army men had a kind of prominence in the cultural zeitgeist that brought them back into mainstream stores like Target, as opposed to the discount bin at Walmart or whatever. So I was on break and I was walking around Target looking for something, and I bought a package of these little green army men, and I think maybe a package of 6 dice or something. And so then a buddy and I, during the downtime at the theater, started coming up with rules to basically have a little war using the little green army men and dice. So that allowed us to have a game to play while we were bored at work. So my buddy and I were playing this game, and the manager sees me, and he comes in and chats. He's like, "Oh, you like games, huh?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I like all sorts of games." He goes, "What's this you're doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, something we made up with these green men, and they shoot each other and stuff." He goes, "Have you ever played other games like this?" I go, "Not really." He goes, "Oh man, you got to come over to my place." And so the next time I had an evening off, and he did too, we arranged for me to go over and hang out at his place and play some games. And the game he had at his place was Warhammer 40,000. Well, holy cow, that one night I can blame for hundreds or maybe thousands of dollars of my disposable income and hours and hours of my life in a hobby, and perhaps the entry into modern gaming, although I would say the entry into my current round of gaming is a student presentation in 2008 or 2009. Maybe 2010? 2010 probably. But, so he introduces me to this game, Warhammer 40,000, which I assume you know what it is, but if you don't, it's a tactical miniature war game where you have little models that are space elves, they call them Eldar, or orcs, or space marines, human beings. And the idea is it's in the far future, and all they do is shoot each other for some reason. Well, I mean, there's a very complicated and long lore about it, but the idea of it is that the galaxy is a very vicious place, and human beings need to fight with these other races to survive, and they all kill each other. It's very grimdark, very 90s, and very fun. So this is a game I started collecting and buying during my free time and with my free money, up until after college. Even into grad school a little bit, I was still collecting Warhammer stuff. But when I moved to Florida, which is where I went to grad school, I didn't really have anyone to play with, and the hobby kind of died out for me. I mentioned before that I just recently started selling my Warhammer stuff, but I wanted to mention how I had started it. Well, a big part of this hobby is painting the miniatures. It's a nice diversion. The miniatures come unpainted. They're generally very elaborately detailed, and so depending on your level of skill, you can spend a long time on a miniature, or even just a few minutes to give it a few dashes of color, or you can spend hours doing extremely detailed work to paint these miniatures. And I did. That became a big part of my hobby with the Warhammer figures, was painting all of them. That I would, while I was watching TV or watching a movie, I would sit with my paints and I would paint the Warhammer miniatures. This isn't something I've really continued. Once I stopped collecting Warhammer, I didn't really have any small miniatures to paint, so that part of my hobby life kind of drifted away. So I stopped playing Warhammer in about 2001. So let's cut this story off there and jump ahead, 16 years? So the last couple years, my son has been an avid Lego builder. His preferred way to play with Lego is to buy a new set, open it up, follow the instructions, and make the thing. After that, the Legos hold significantly less interest for him. He generally doesn't have a lot of interest in building a thing a second time, and he doesn't have a lot of interest in playing with the Lego beyond that initial build. Well, this is distressing for us, of course, because Lego is incredibly expensive, especially if you're only going to play with it once to build the thing. We also So we've since discovered stores that will buy used Lego, and so he can like sort of sell the Lego set at 70% of its value and then buy a new Lego set with the money, and it allows us to kind of make more of that initial investment, and he can enjoy it. But it got me to thinking about other things that somebody might like to do for the hobby. And so we bought him a model, like an airplane, a model airplane that you glue together and paint. And it's interesting. He said he liked it okay. His least favorite part of it, though, was the putting together of the model, which is, I thought, interesting, because I thought the putting together was the fun thing about the Lego. But I guess it's different enough that he didn't really like that as much. But he really liked painting it. He thought that was pretty fun. And then he started asking about all the miniatures that I have, because I think I mentioned offhand, because he had seen the Warhammer stuff, because I'm packaging it up and selling it. So he was asking about painting, and I have a whole bunch of games that have miniatures in them, so he was asking about painting the miniatures in my games. And that's been something I've been kind of itching to get back into anyway. So this was the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back. So yesterday he and I had some time. His mother and my daughter were at a swim meet. So he and I popped over to the hobby store and bought a few more paints to supplement the ones he had gotten when he was painting his airplane. And I decided that we would start with the least valuable models in my collection, the ones where if we did a crummy job, we didn't care. And that would be the very cheap, nicely produced and nicely carved, but very cheap models from the yellow game Zombie 15. You get like 100 zombie models. There's 3 different sculpts, and there's a bunch of original ones too. You get one of each character, and you get the big boss character. But then there's 3 different sculpts of zombie that are just generic zombies. And you get, like I said, you get like 100 of them. So I busted those out. We got some primer, and I primed it. I primed a bunch of them. And then actually my daughter saw us doing that. She got home by the meet by that point and said she wanted to join too. So the 3 of us sat down at the table and we painted a bunch of miniatures. I'll post a picture. They are not great, but they're not bad. They look much better than they did when they weren't painted at all. It's going to be real hard to play Zombie 15 unless we paint all the rest of them now, but I think we will. And in doing so, we'll get good at it again. It was really quite pleasant to sit with the kids painting the models. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed doing that. Turns out when I'm 41, my eyes don't focus on detail nearly as well as they did when I was 20 or to 25, somewhere in there, which was my main painting years, which is not surprising, a little distressing, but death isn't fun. So I'm going to have to get like a magnifying thing on a stand or something so that I can see what I'm doing to paint these. But it was a lot of fun just getting started with this painting again, and I think it's going to be something I'll be doing from time to time from now on. And I know the kids really liked it. So that's really, really fun. I just wanted to share that with you today. And I guess for the Guild, if you wanted to comment on this, I'd love to hear from you. Guild3269 over on boardgamegeek.com. My username is Wombat929. I guess my question for you would be, what aspects of the hobby do you enjoy that aren't actually playing games? Do you model? Do you build foam core inserts or other bling for your games like I have talked about before? Do you enjoy organizing games? I'm going to do another episode about being a game librarian pretty soon. What aspects of the hobby do you like? If you're a painter, what are your top 2 painting tips? I'm getting back into the hobby and keen to find out. What's your advice for paint? I bought these modeling paint at the local hobby shop, which I like supporting them, but at $3.49 per paint pot, it didn't feel like a very good deal, and I'm wondering if there's better options. That said, I may still buy them at the local shop because small shops like that live and die on hobbyists, and being able to go in and ask advice is really helpful. So I look forward to hearing from you, and let me know what kinds of things you do. If you paint, please do pop into the Guild and post a picture of the models you've been painting let us see that great work that you've done. Well, that's about it for me today. Thank you for joining me. I hope to hear from you soon. In the meantime, I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
He lived with his mother and the torments of Christ. The world was transformed, a crowd gathered round, pressed against his window so they could be the first to meet James Ensor, Belgium's famous painter. Raise a glass and sit and stare, understand the man.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.